I was standing in the courtroom, quietly hugging the edge of the table, when my ex-husband's new wife pointed at me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's a gold digger. She only married him for his money." Those words didn't surprise me. Evelyn had been ready to take me before Jake married her. But to hear it said in front of the judge, in front of my lawyer, in front of my daughter, broke my heart. I felt a stab, like I'd been shot. But I said nothing. I didn't flinch. I didn't read. I didn't prepare myself. Then Jake's lawyer, Mr. Donan, added fuel to the fire. He leaned forward and said mechanically, "There is a clear financial basis here, sir. Miss Langley has benefited significantly from Mr. Langley's income throughout the marriage. We believe her current financial needs reflect a model like Light. He is light, confident, and perfectly rehearsed. The way he addresses Miss Langley, it's as if I were a stranger. As if I weren't Jake's adopted daughter when he travels the country for company retreats. As if I didn't pay rent for the first 3 years he found himself." But I said nothing. I looked at my daughter, Bella, 13, sitting right behind me. Her hands were clasped in her lap. She looked small in that chair, but her eyes were bright. And then, without warning, she stood up. "Mom," she said, her voice even, steady but loud enough to be heard over the din of the processing room. "Should I tell them what we found on Mom's bank statements?" Everyone in the room turned. The building records were entered immediately. Mr. Clean stiffened. His smile disappeared. He sat down, not saying a word. I didn't expect her to say that. I didn't want her to say that. I told her I would go and let them deal with it. But my daughter had other plans. She wouldn't let anyone lie about her mother, especially when she wrote about architecture. When it came time to fix things, everything had changed. In court, in front of the accusations, in front of my daughter's testimony, I was just trying to hold on to the broken pieces of my life. After the divorce, every day I felt like I was waking up in someone else's house. The walls were blank. My name didn't matter anymore. I went from Mrs. Langley to Mira, the abandoned woman. Most people don't realize how quickly things fall apart when your husband leaves you and replaces your entire life like it's just a costume he's bored with. Jake and I have been together for 14 years. We met at the University of North Carolina. I was a junior majoring in education. He was an ambitious business major with a big smile and cheap dreams. I had to beg him. Back then, he didn't have much money, but he talked like he did. I trusted him. I worked the night shift at a diner to help him pay his tuition and bills when he was out of school. I put my studies on hold when we found out I spoke Thai. That was the beginning of it all, Bella. I built my world around that little girl. While Jake was working his way up the corporate ladder, I stayed home, cooking, cleaning, packing lunches, and proudly being the support system he claimed to need. I thought that made me a partner. I thought we were a team. But the job changed him. Or maybe it revealed who he really was. When Bella was 10, Jake stopped coming home on weekends. He traveled more, spending the holidays alone in hotel rooms. The distance between us was not just emotional but strategic. Later, I found out he had been sending money to a woman named Evelyn. I didn't know it at the time, but she had been in his life much longer than I had. When I confronted him about the lies, he didn't even deny it. He told me, "You've had it easy for years. You should be grateful. Thank you for the betrayal. For raising our daughter on your own while you built a second life behind me." When he left, he didn't just take half of our bank account. He took the house, the insurance, the car we shared, everything. I had to fight just to keep the small monthly alimony payments in primary custody of Bella. He fought me on every decision, always saying I was trying to force him out. By then, he had a brand new house with a designer kitchen and a woman who dressed like a magazine cover. Evelyn was younger than me. She had opinions. I started tutoring part-time and eventually taught 3 positions. We didn't have much money, but we had peace. I cooked dinner. She graded my papers. On weekends, we baked. Sometimes we just sat on the floor watching old sitcoms with a bowl of popcorn and a pile of homework between us. It wasn't glamorous, but it was heartfelt. Then the letter arrived. Jake was contesting our custody agreement. He wanted joint custody, which would cut my child support in half. His attorney claimed that I wasn't providing a stable financial environment. He didn't have a problem with my parenting. He just didn't want to pay for it. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, holding the letter, feeling like someone had knocked the air out of me. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of defending my worth to people who didn't know what I was sacrificing. Bella saw me crying that night. At first, she didn't say anything. She just sat next to me and held my hand. Then she whispered, "You don't have to fight him alone. I know everything. You see everything." I didn't ask what she meant. I just held her and said, "You're a child, Bella. You shouldn't have to carry this." But in her mind, she wasn't just a child. She was my witness, and she was paying attention. The courtroom was cold. Not physically. I was wearing my best coat, but emotionally, everyone in that room had chosen sides. Jake sat to my right at the table across from me, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Evelyn sat next to him in a fitted coat and heels too high for court. Her fingernails touched the screen of her phone. I could hear them even over the hushed whispers and shuffling of papers. I sat alone with my attorney, a young woman named Nina Myers. She was sharp and kind, but under a lot of pressure. Jake's legal team had filed a lawsuit that would change everything. If the judge agreed that I had failed to provide a safe financial environment for Bella, I could lose primary custody. And not just because of the money. Bella would be split between two homes. Her routine was broken. Her voice pushed to the back. I glanced at her in the back of the courtroom. She had insisted on coming, even though I had begged her to stay home. She wanted to hear everything. She said that if they were going to talk about her life, she deserved to be there. I couldn't argue with that. The hearing began in silence. Judge Reinhardt reviewed our papers without showing any emotion. Then Mr. Clean, Jake's attorney, stood up and began his opening statement. He paced the room as if it were a stage, his voice perfectly rhythmic, carefully persuasive. "Judge, this isn't about restricting a mother's access to her child. This is about protecting the best interests of the children." Miss Langley was working part-time, living in a rental home with no health insurance. Meanwhile, Mr. Eyalt Langley had the resources and stability to provide Bella with a more secure future. He didn't even look at me. I was just another item on his agenda. Then the blow came. Evelyn stood. She didn't have to, but she asked the judge to speak. He granted it. She adjusted her sleeves, then stepped forward with the confidence of someone who believed every lie she was about to tell. She had only married Jake for his money. She said he paid for her lifestyle, her house, her vacations, and now she was trying to drain him of child support and alimony. She never loved him. She used him. My heart pounded. I kept my face straight. I knew if I cried, I would look weak. If I got angry, I would look bitter. Either way, I would fit the story they were telling. Evelyn turned slightly toward the judge. "I didn't say she was a bad mother. I said she had financial motives. That was important." Then came the worst part. Mr. Klein stepped back, as if to underscore her words with legal authority. "Sir," he said, "we believe that Miss Langley's financial motives have consistently influenced her behavior. She has benefited significantly throughout the marriage and has continued to do so since the divorce. This is not about co-parenting. This is about ensuring fairness and accountability." My chest tightened. I had been silent throughout. Over Jake's nighttime betrayal, Bella had asked me why Dad was always busy. For months, I had skipped meals so she wouldn't notice the empty refrigerator. I had maintained my dignity throughout. But sitting there, while they framed me as a lazy opportunist, I felt like I was being erased. I glanced at Bella again. She was clutching her hands in her lap. She was looking straight ahead, not at her father, not at Evelyn, but at the judge. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they had said their reconciliation and we would move on to the evidence, the testimony, the paperwork. But before anyone else could speak, Bella stood up. "Excuse me," she said. The room was silent. She took a step forward. The judge looked surprised but curious. "May I speak?" The judge looked at me. I nodded, uncertain, my heart pounding. Bella stepped forward slowly, her chin raised. Her voice was even. "I had only one question. Mom, should I tell them what we found on Dad's bank statements?" There was an audible gasp. Mr. Klein blinked as if he had misheard. Evelyn's face tensed. Jake shifted in his chair. Bella looked straight at me. She wasn't angry. She was calm, almost tired of pretending not to know, tired of watching people lie about her mother. I didn't answer her out loud, but I knew there was no stopping her now. Things were about to change. I didn't tell her to talk. I didn't ask for help. But Bella saw through the silence I had surrounded myself with. The truth weighed heavily on her, and in that moment, she made the decision I had been so afraid of. She stood in the courtroom as if she had every right to be heard. The judge paused, watching her with careful concern. A child interrupting a trial was not something you could ignore, especially when the room had just been accused of hiding something. "I'm sorry," she said plainly, "but they're saying my mother took my father's money. That's not true. My father gave the money away." Mr. Klein stood as if to object, but the judge raised his hand to signal him to remain seated. "Bella, this isn't a formal deposition," the judge said softly. "But I'll let you speak for a moment. Go ahead." Bella took a deep breath. She looked at Jake, then at me. "A few months ago, when I visited Dad's house, Dad was helping me with my math homework. He'd logged into his bank account to pay for some online tutoring software, but he'd forgotten to log out. After he left the room, I saw that his screen was still open. I didn't mean to pry, but something caught my eye. There were multiple payments to someone named Evelyn Marcus. The name hit Jake like a punch. He blinked, trying to keep his composure, but I could see the panic spreading across his face. Evelyn froze next to him. She recognized the name too. "She got money almost every month," Bella continued. "Sometimes twice, not a small amount. I said nothing at first, but then I told Mom about it. Mom said it was none of our business. Mom told me not to interfere. I told Mom it wasn't her problem, that she shouldn't be dragged into the lies of adults. But Mom remembered every detail. Bella said Evelyn wasn't just a friend. She was someone Dad would sneak around with. I remembered her from before the divorce. I'd met her at a restaurant once. They sat together laughing. Dad told me not to tell Mom." The courtroom was silent. Even Judge Reinhardt seemed taken aback. No one expected their daughter to speak, and certainly not like this. She was calm. She wasn't emotional or flustered. She was precise, careful, and painfully honest. Bella reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded envelope. "We printed out the statements just in case. I brought them with me." Kayla, my attorney, turned to me with wide eyes. She didn't know about this either. I didn't give her the documents because I had no intention of using them. I didn't want to be dishonored. I wanted to win the right way. But my daughter had other instincts. She'd seen people lie about me for years, and now she was done. Kayla stood up and walked to the bench, taking the envelope from Bella. She handed it to the judge. "Judge, I don't know about this evidence, but if I may, I believe it's relevant to the financial motive claim." The judge opened the documents. He read them silently. Page after page of Jake's secret transfers, thousands of dollars, all the while claiming that I was the one who drained him. Mr. Klein stood up again, but this time more cautiously. "Judge, we object to the use of documents obtained without consent." The judge raised his hand. She had accessed them while she was at her father's house, while he was logged in. Technically, this was not a violation, but I will rule on admissibility later. For now, I had seen enough to understand the big picture. Jake looked furious. Evelyn stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. I could see her mind working, going over the story Derek had told her. That was no longer my concern. The balance in the room had shifted. No one called me a gold digger anymore. No one pretended that Jake had nothing to hide. I stood up, walked over to Bella, and pulled her gently into my arms. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered. "I wanted to," she said. "You've always protected me." I thought maybe it was time for me to do the same. I kissed the top of her head. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. The judge took his time going through the bank statements. Each turn of the page sounded louder than the last. No one dared to say anything. Even Jake's lawyer, who had been pacing the room with a haughty air just minutes ago, sat motionless in his chair. His confidence was gone. Finally, Judge Reinhardt looked up. "Mr. Langley, could you explain these periodic transfers to Miss Evelyn Marcus?" Jake cleared his throat, then forced a smile. "She was an old friend. I helped her through a difficult time." The judge raised an eyebrow. "A difficult time that lasted 3 years, with payments totaling more than $60,000. Jake shifted in his chair. "It was inconsistent. Some of it was reimbursement, to someone unrelated to him, not on his tax records, and not mentioned in his financial disclosures." The judge's tone remained even, but each word felt like a punch. "You claimed financial hardship under oath, Mr. Langley. You accused Ms. Langley of overcharging while hiding tens of thousands of dollars in private payments." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I watched Jake cower as the weight of his lies weighed him down. Evelyn didn't move either. Her eyes didn't leave the floor. Mr. Klein tried to regain his composure. "Judge, even if these transactions were outside the scope of our original request, they don't refute our main argument." The judge cut him off. "What they did was severely undermine your credibility. You accused Ms. Langley of financial manipulation, yet your client was funding a separate relationship behind closed doors. That changed the context of the entire case." The room fell silent. Kayla nodded slightly at me. I understood what he meant. The judge wasn't just reviewing child support, he was reviewing the entire custody motion. Evelyn finally broke the silence. She stood abruptly and turned to Jake. "You told me she was draining you," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You told me you couldn't afford both houses and you sent her money all the time." Jake tried to quiet her. "Evelyn, not now." She pulled her hand out of his reach. "No, this was the time. You humiliated me in this courtroom. You dragged your daughter into this. And for what? To hide the fact that you lied to all of us?" She ran from the courtroom. Jake didn't chase after her. The judge leaned forward. "This case was brought to question Miss Langley's financial fitness and stability. Based on the evidence, I find that concern unfounded. In fact, I find her to have a consistent pattern of integrity and restraint. On the contrary, Mr. Langley's lack of transparency and repeated attempts to manipulate financial information raise significant concerns." He paused to listen. Primary custody would remain with Miss Langley. Child support would not change. In addition, the court would order a financial audit of Mr. Langley's entire estate to determine whether further legal action would be taken. I felt a breath return to my chest. Not relief, but something deeper. Validation. I had spent so much time proving that I was not who they said I was. I didn't have to do that anymore. Bella slipped her hand into mine. She didn't say anything but held it tight. Her chin was raised as if she was proud of what she had done. I looked at her and knew she would never forget this day. Not because her father had been arrested, but because she had told the truth, and that was important. As we walked into the hallway, people made way for us. Those who had whispered when Evelyn had called me a gold digger now looked at me with respect, or maybe guilt. Kayla turned to me before she left. "You didn't just win, Nina. You showed everyone who you are." I nodded, but my eyes were still on Bella. I knew who I was. I just wanted her to see it too. She did. The case was over, but something deeper had changed inside me. For the first time in years, I walked out of the courthouse without shame. I am not a woman who defends herself against lies. I am not a woman who tries to hold on to the broken pieces of self-respect. I was simply myself again, Nina Langley, a mother, a teacher, and a survivor who refused to be rewritten by someone else's story. Bella and I got in the car in silence. I started the engine, but neither of us moved. She stared out the window, biting the edge of her sleeve, the way she did when her thoughts were too big to put into words. "You did something really brave today," I said. "But I have to ask, are you okay?" She nodded, then looked at me. "Yeah, I just didn't think it would feel so heavy afterward." I reached out and took her hand. "It was because you stood up for something real. Telling the truth can be heavy, but you did it with strength. I'm proud of you." She looked back out the window. "I didn't do it for myself." "I know," I said, "but you showed people who you were, and that was more important than anything they said about me." We went home to our little apartment. The walls still needed repainting, and the bathroom faucet still made a noise when you turned it on too hard. But it felt like war somehow. More hours, more things earned. That night after dinner, I tucked her in and sat by the bed while she flipped through a comic book she'd read a dozen times. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and kissed her cheek. "Mom," she asked. "Yeah, I know you don't want me to say anything in court. Are you mad?" I thought about it for a second. No? I was scared. Scared that it would backfire. Scared that they would twist it and make it worse. But I didn't risk it. I was right. She smiled. "I didn't want them to lie about me anymore. You are not what they say you are." I squeezed her hand. Neither did she. After she fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. I opened the stack of papers I had kept. Documents Jake never thought I would sort through. Files he never thought I would keep. I had protected him for so long, not out of love, but out of habit. I wanted to believe that silence still had dignity. But silence only works when you are surrounded by people who respect it. That trial taught me something I didn't want to admit. Keeping quiet to keep the peace only works when you are not the one being attacked. I am no longer silent. Neither is my daughter. I don't know what will happen next to Jake and Evelyn. Whether they stay together or fall apart doesn't matter to me. I don't need them to fall apart for me to feel whole. Their cruelty does not define me, and their judgment no longer holds. What I took away from that trial was not revenge. It was clarity. They called me a gold digger, because it was easier than calling myself one. They tried to reduce my sacrifice to dollars and court documents, but they forgot who had the real power. Me, the woman who kept going even after everything was taken away. Me, the mother whose daughter saw her worth before the world did. I stopped chasing justice and started standing up. At work, my coworkers asked how the hearing went. I smiled and said it was okay. I did not share the drama, the tension, or the silence that followed my daughter's question. That moment was ours. It did not need to be retold as gossip. It was part of our story now, a story we owned, a story no one else could tell for us. The next morning, as Bella got ready for school, she somehow looked taller. She pulled her hoodie over her head, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and smiled at me as if nothing could make her lose her balance. "Ready?" I asked. "Always," she said. "Me too. I'm not a gold digger. I'm a mother. And they'll never forget the day my daughter reminded them of who I really am." If this story means anything to you, if you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or misjudged, I hope you now know that your truth has power. And sometimes it only takes a voice, like my daughter's, to remind the world of that. If you feel something while watching, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. I read every single story. And if you want more real emotional stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an important moment. Thank you for being here. Your time, your heart, and your voice matter.